The Steelers came up short in Week 12 against the Bears, 31-28. Mason Rudolph, filling in for Aaron Rodgers, made his first mistake on the first drive of this game, looking for DK Metcalf on the back shoulder play. He left it just a couple inches short. The defender was able to make a great play on that ball, went up with one hand and brought it down. Another couple of inches of air under that ball, and it would have been a highlight play for the other side. So I'm not going to rag too hard on Rudolph for that one, although he did almost make the same mistake later in the game, and I will rag on him for doing the same mistake twice. Early in this game, I noticed Benton and Harmon filling in for an alien Cam Hayward, playing more than they usually would. Those guys are more penetrators. They're built to get upfield. They're more pass rush prototypes. And they were kind of getting bullied when they were asked to do the thing that Cam Hayward is usually so good at, the two-gapping, the hold your guy up and make sure he doesn't get to the second level, and then whichever lane the running back decides to go through, once he declares, make sure that lane closes as soon as possible. Cam Hayward's generally so good at that, and Benton and Harmon specifically, I saw getting buckled and just kind of overpowered at times against the run today. Not that rushing yards ended up winning it for the Bears today. I think the passing touchdowns from Caleb Williams were the difference in the game. I think a lot of the reason that this defense can frustrate people is because it's built to get traffic in front of the quarterback. Those pass rushers are so good at getting their hands in the passing lanes. And then they have the coverage over the top. So if anything does get completed, does get through that traffic, they're there to tackle the catch and make sure a big play doesn't become an explosive play. There's been a lot made, especially recently, about how this team needs turnovers to win. They're over-reliant on turnovers. I've talked before about how turnovers aren't unforced errors. You still get credit for forcing those turnovers. Outside of the turnovers, if you're not even getting pressure, and they only had one sack and one quarterback hit today, and you're also not getting those deflections that are so key to the Steelers defense, only two of them against the Bears today, you're certainly facing an uphill battle, not only in terms of winning the game, but in terms of creating those turnovers that lead to those kind of field flipping scenarios that enable you to be so good and so consistent in winning the one-score games. And especially when you're playing against a guy like Caleb Williams, whether it's a spy or just zones across the board, you cannot turn your back on that guy or he is going to, deliver the kill stroke before you even know what hit you. You have to have eyes on him or else he's just going to take off. So on this play, Malik Harrison is responsible for stopping that, but he's also responsible for protecting the guy in behind him. He's responsible for stopping a potential run. So he gets brought in low by the play action, and Williams is able to go right in over his shoulder. So you see, again, the defense over top of the guy to prevent big from turning into explosive. To be fair, Malik did redeem himself one play later with a run stuff for no gain. That's the good that comes with the bad of sometimes being out of position because of that play action. Unfortunately, that drive culminated in a touchdown for the Bears, the first score of the day. On that play, TJ was dropping into coverage into the middle, and he almost did deflect that pass. But again, as I've been saying, the engine that drives this team is one, pressure, and two, pass deflections. And when you're not getting either of those, you saw DJ Moore just hit the whip route on Jalen Ramsey and pretty easily shook him off and got that touchdown there. And then bad became worse when Gainwell had trouble handling the kickoff. The Steelers' next drive started around their own 5. Fortunately, Jalen Warren was able to bail them out of that hole, bouncing around the outside on a counter run with both Seumalo and Anderson leading the way for him. They ran the counter a couple times pretty well in this game. For Anderson's part of it, he was on the field, I think, on most of, if not every snap of that first drive, the first scoring drive for the Steelers. Whether it's a fullback or as an inline tight end, he was a big part of the Steelers' offense when it was working today. So it's good to see with Seumalo back in the mix, the Anderson package continuing to expand. I got to tell you, that's the kind of thing that are going to get people talking about Art Smith, and he very well could parlay that momentum into another shot at head coaching. Mason Rudolph was able to shake off his early struggles. He completed his next 10 passes, didn't throw another incompletion the rest of the first half. He got into the groove with some quick hitters to DK, and then he found Skoranek sitting down in the seam between the shallow and the deep zones. You got a wildcat snap from Gainwell They used the DK jet motion as window dressing. After using it previously, they used it as a decoy to get a first down run for Gainwell. I don't blame anyone who got some Matt Canada PTSD from seeing that, but all things in moderation, I say. Most things in moderation. I had heard some negative analysis about Jonnu Smith earlier in the week from people on Steelers social media. I think Rodgers has fairly or unfairly, I lean towards the latter on that one, lost trust in Jonnu after he was a big part of their offense early in the year. They've kind of gone away from those designed setups to him. But I think with Mason in the game, that was one of the things that was on his card of things that he talked about with Smith. These are my plays that I'm comfortable with. Can we kind of tailor some of this to what I'm good at? That was probably one of the things that, if not, he specifically asked to do, that just kind of trickled back into the Steelers' offense, just with Rodgers not scoffing at it anymore. Mason was able to cap off that Smith-authored drive with a swing pass to DK, making good use of the lateral motion with them, the lateral motion with DK on that drive. And then they double dipped less than a minute later with a defensive score. The Wisconsin boys, TJ and Nick Herbig, combined on that one. TJ was kind of stymied originally, but he kept fighting through it. And it was a great job of him by both containing and closing and finishing on a very dangerous, dynamic runner. And when he's got a guy penned in and he's going for the kill to get that ball out, he's as good as anyone since Peanut Tillman. The guy that they named that punch after might be renamed the TJ punch at some point if he continues on the pace that he's at. But 7 points for the defense, 2 touchdowns in 46 seconds for the Steelers to recapture the lead. It was a heck of a way for TJ to surpass his brother's sack mark, and they had all the momentum in the world on their side at that point. They followed that up a couple minutes later with Y.A. Black ripping another fumble out of the hands of, I believe, Swift there. And, I thought that was a forward progress situation, but if it had gone against us the other way, I would have been upset about it. But it's an unreviewable play, so it is what it is. Darnell Washington continues to run like a snowplow in the open field, just running over defensive backs. DK Metcalf at one point hopped off the field, unable to put any weight on that left leg. He did return, but he wasn't as effective as he was early in the game. I thought using him short would open up him on some of that long stuff, but maybe the pain in the left leg kind of limited his ability to separate his burst or explosiveness. I thought it was interesting how the replay assist was able to say, no, that's not a first down, Kenneth Gainwell, using a camera angle that very clearly showed him being tackled by his face mask. A very dangerous, very illegal play. Obviously not a reviewable play. You can't enforce a penalty on replay. But as the unreviewable play giveth, and it taketh away. So you can't get too upset about that one either. There was a hit with Ramsey on Williams going out of bounds that the stadium wanted penalized. I thought it was a clean hit. I thought it happened before his first foot hit out of bounds. But I was just watching on the antenna game, so I didn't have the availability of rewind to go back and look at it again. I thought Ramsey did push the envelope, continuing to jaw and argue with the sideline after the play was over. I thought that could have possibly pushed him into the red. And I could understand the league wanting to, nip his behavior in the bud after what it had escalated to last week. So fortunately to see that one dispelled without any laundry coming into play. Nick Herbig had a great TFL. He is so slick and slippery. It doesn't matter basically what you throw at him. He'll just dodge a double team, a chip and a block. He'll just go around the one, go under the other, go through one, go around the other. It's going to be exciting to see him continuing to elaborate on his bag of moves. I think his effectiveness was diminished a little bit in an expanded role, filling in for Highsmith tonight. I think we should continue to milk this 3-man rotation as long as we can. Herbig is as effective as anyone more effective than any pass rusher in the NFL coming off the bench, clean and rested with the air in his lungs. I think he was a little bit less effective today, whether that's because of fatigue or because they were specifically gaming a speed rusher and they weren't as worried about the Highsmith spin move. The Highsmith also has a little bit more power to his game. They were more exclusively focused on the speed of Herbig. They were able to neutralize him a little bit better. Either way, they weren't able to hold him entirely off of the stat page. Kyle Duggar, for all the praise he's getting, sacrificed the second touchdown in man coverage. Not a great attempt at a man beater, the shimmy from a tight end. Not a great piece of route running. It was a good use of motion from the Bears to get his guy ISO'd up on a safety on that side. And then the man beater just did what he had to do to convert. That was a situation where I think at least one person was in a situation they shouldn't have been in there, because JPJ, dealing with a leg injury in this game, was not on the field for that play. Did return, but ultimately was not able to finish this game. The explosive touchdown to Kenneth Gainwell, I'm sorry, almost touchdown, was called back inches short at the last second. It was a fourth down from a tush-push formation. Connor Hayward had previously been stuffed on a tush-push, and instead of going back to that well, they decided to hand it to Gainwell going around the outside. Two trailer park girls go around the outside. I remember an eerily similar play on an icy night a couple years ago against the Raiders, icing that game with a H-back run around the outside. Round the outside, round the outside. I believe Connor Hayward was the ball handler in that situation. This time he was the guy handing it off. But another flashback to the Matt Canada era. Big time gutsy call from Tomlin, going for it there. As they mentioned on the broadcast, that is counter to his usual personality. He doesn't usually take risks, but he did there. It paid off. Of course, Warren was able to finish it off just 2 snaps later, I believe. It is so tough to defend the outside rush. When you also have to protect the tush push, and leverage is so important, and just the sheer tonnage of body weight you have to throw to the middle of the field. It's so tough to also have to defend peeling off of that and pitching it to the outside the way that the Steelers team can do. Unfortunately, this one's not going to show up in the stat sheet because it was after a Nick Herbig offsides. But Joey Porter did have an interception in this game. He's been ragged for his stone hands, to borrow the parlance from Madden, going back to Madden 04, I believe, on that one. But after the pick, Joey just handling the ball like in one hand. I think on the broadcast they described it as holding the ball like a loaf of bread, just begging for a fumble, which is of course what did happen. I think he saw the free play and thought, nothing I do matters here. But you could have made a bad play worse there. Rolling into the second, Mason took some flack from JJ about eluding a rush, getting free, and then immediately sliding down. I don't think any of us who know Mason's history have any flack to give him for getting down, saving his body. He sacrificed more than enough for the Steelers' crest for a lifetime there. So I do not blame him at all for protecting himself there. But as I mentioned before, Mason almost repeated his mistake early in that game, underthrowing a back shoulder ball. This one to Roman Wilson ended up incomplete, thankfully. Fortunately, Wilson was able to play DB better than Metcalf was in the prior eventuality, and he knocked that one away. Otherwise, the narrative on Mason, I think, would be much more negative than it is. Caleb Williams, for his part of it, was just a little bit off on a lot of throws today, but he had a perfect throw on the touchdown, his next touchdown, just over Joey Porter Jr.'s arms. Joey was playing about 5 yards shallower in his zone than the rest of the guys in the shallow zones on what looked like a cover 3 there. It wasn't a play action or anything. Not sure why he was pulled down so low. Maybe he was tasked with not giving up a Caleb Williams rush on that play. I'm not sure. What looked like out of position for a normal cover 3, Williams was able to exploit that right in behind him. The Bears just called the right play for that coverage. They had 2 guys on the outside to pull the 2 outside safeties away from the play, leaving just the 1 deep guy in the middle of the field. And then you had a deep vertical route, a deep dig, and Ramsey had to pick between one of those guys. And then after he made his choice, Caleb Williams just threw it to the other guy, made his choice wrong. So that's just the divide concept right there, where you run 2 guys to the same zone and then split them apart, make him choose, and then you make your choice after him. If we were in quarters, we would have been able to defend that better. Probably would have forced Caleb Williams to try to take off and run with that. So it was just a good job of play calling from Ben Johnson, another coordinator who always gets a lot of attention in head coach searching. Unfortunately, we have to talk about Darnell Washington giving up the Montez Sweat, the strip sack. For all the love he's been getting, he is still one of the slowest guys out of a snap, at least on this team, but that I've seen in a while. He didn't know the snap count. That's what it must have been, because he was surprised that everything was moving around him. He was like, oh, I got to start doing stuff now. Beat clean, beat fast, and obviously it turned into a big play, a takeaway for this team. And it's in a game that ended up so close that any number of plays could be the turning point, whether it was the early interception, whether it was that fumble, whether it was a illegal formation play at the end of the game with Kenneth Gainwell not being able to line up correctly, Mason Rudolph not being a full-time quarterback. Of course, Gainwell should know the rule and what his job is on that play, but it's also on the quarterback to make sure before the ball is snapped that everything is kosher around him. JJ also did a good job of highlighting this on the broadcast as well. When Malik was in the middle, more of the run stuffing guy, the role that Landon Roberts played a year ago, they would just throw it over his shoulder. And then when Peyton Wilson was out there, more of the run and chase, athletic pass defense guy, they would just run it down our throats and make you think, boy, I wish Malik was out there for that play. And then when James Pierre was in outside contain on a run play, obviously a good runner with great vision is going to find and exploit that. And Kyle Monangai, a guy I watched a lot in Big Ten play, he's a smart, physical runner. He's kind of cut from the same cloth as Jaylen Warren. I think 7 or 8 pounds lighter, but they're both 5'8", kind of that bowling ball prototype runner. Problem to deal with for a number of reasons for a defense. They were ultimately able to finish that one off from 11 personnel, caught the Steelers in nickel, and then just handed it to Monangai and let him finish it right up the middle. On a play, they doubled both Hayward and Benton after spreading the Steelers out, getting them in a lighter than usual box. Then they doubled the only 2 guys down on the line. And after they were washed out, it doesn't matter who's out on the field, Malik or Peyton Wilson, they're going to get that one in the end zone. Williams was back out there. Keyshawn Williams is back out there for kick returns. So he did clear concussion protocol, but for some reason, Calvin Austin has supplanted him as the punt returner for whatever reason. And by the way, another note, James Pierre, since he's now a full-time defender, it seems like, they've replaced him on the punt coverage unit. I'm not sure what happened to Broderick. They called it a stinger. It looked like a pass rusher leaped into him and then grabbed and tackled him by the head and neck area on the way down. Broderick threw his helmet as he was walking off the field. So frustration, either because he had been given some bad news or because he thought he had been treated unfairly and dirtily on the field. I think a lot of people, myself included, are going to have something to say about that play. The response from the other fan base is going to be, well, your guy Jaylen Warren does that all the time. Well, the difference between jumping into a guy and jumping and then grabbing and tackling him by the neck and head area is that second clause where you grab and tackle him by the neck and head area. That's a dangerous play. You know, I don't need to explain to you why that's a dangerous play. What am I even trying? That's a dangerous play. Don't do that. That's dirty. That was a dirty play. I've said it now. It was a dirty play. The hold on DK that took away a Gainwell touchdown, I don't think that was a hold. I think maybe block in the back. Obviously, block in the back isn't a foul if it happens in the tackle box. So maybe they were saying that I don't know if he came from outside of the tackle box. I don't know if the rule is different if you come from outside of the tackle box. But they called it a holding. JJ seemed to agree with the referee. I don't think I saw much of a hold there. He was spun around because pressure was applied to him in his back. But again, I don't think it rose to the level of a block in the back or any sort of foul. Either way, they were able to finish it a couple of plays later. Freiermuth over the middle for the touchdown. By the way, over the middle, I was listening to the post-game show, Charlie Batch and Mike Prosciutto, I want to say. But maybe I'm racist against Italians for assuming that would be a person's name. They had a caller who wanted to talk about the middle of the field. Why are they never using we're always talking about they never use the middle of the field. Which, by the way, I have issues with that statement already. But let's grant that premise. Why are they never using the middle of the field? And then at the end of the game, you're only using the middle of the field. And then you keep the clock running, and then you have to run stupid plays because the clock's running and you don't have timeout. Well, it's easier to throw a play over the middle of the field late in the game when they're defending the sidelines because they know you want to throw it to the sidelines to get out of bounds to stop the clock. For 3.5 quarters for the last 3 to 5 years, the Steelers have been seeing single high coverage, a safety in the middle of the field, shutting that down, a spy in the middle, a guy underneath him. They've been doing everything they can to take away at the middle of the field for this team and force those outside throws to, it's been George Pickens, now it's DK, and they don't have quite the chemistry that they used to have for a number of reasons that is a topic for a whole nother video. But the point being, it's harder at the end of the game when they know you're trying to get out of bounds to get it to the sideline. The defense is trying to funnel you to the middle of the field. You want to take what the defense has given you. That's your instinct as a football player. Tomlin made a risky decision to punt it away late in that game with a little over 2 minutes left, 3 timeouts, and trust his defense to get the ball back for him. And they did. And the Steelers had 2 chances at the end of the game with their offense to win it, and they just came up short both times. You'd like to think that something might have been different if Aaron Rodgers was out there, but it's no point playing that hypothetical game. By the way, on the final play of the game, the guy who ended up making the game-winning deflection for the Bears was Penn State legend Jaquan Brisker. So a bittersweet ending for the Penn State segment of Steelers Nation. But for me on Sundays, I'm no longer a Penn State fan, so it wasn't that sweet for me.